Everyone heard the screeching sound of the car hitting something or someone, but nobody stopped. The city streets were full of rushing feet, impatient drivers, and indifferent passersby. On the asphalt, 7-year-old Tyler struggled to move, his small body trembling, his eyes wide with shock and fear. Yet the crowd flowed around him like a river, blind to the child's pain. Then from the worn, cracked pavement came the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps. A man limping, his movements heavy with age and experience, stopped right beside Tyler. He bent down carefully, assessing the boy's injuries with the quiet precision of someone who had faced danger countless times before. And in that instant, as the man lifted Tyler into his arms, the city seemed to pause. Because when you learn who this man was, why he stopped, and what he had endured in his life, you'll understand why the entire city suddenly rose to its feet, awed, silent, and profoundly moved. The intersection of Maple Street and 3rd Avenue wasn't known for anything special. Just another crosswalk in downtown Springfield, where office workers hurried to lunch breaks and shoppers rushed between errands. The traffic light had been broken for 3 days, flashing yellow in all directions, turning every crossing into a game of chance. Tyler Mitchell, 7 years old with sandy hair and a backpack covered in superhero patches, had made this walk 100 times before. His elementary school was just 4 blocks from his grandmother's apartment, and every Tuesday, she'd pick him up for their special afternoon together. But that Tuesday, Grandma Rose was running late, caught in a doctor's appointment that stretched longer than expected. Tyler waited by the school fence for 20 minutes, watching other kids disappear into their parents' cars. His teacher, Mrs. Henderson, had offered to wait with him, but Tyler insisted he was old enough to walk to Grandma's alone. He'd done it before, just not by himself. The crosswalk at Maple and 3rd was busy, as always. Cars rolled through the broken light with varying degrees of caution. Some slowed, others barely tapped their brakes. Tyler approached the corner, looking left, then right, just like his mother had taught him. A delivery truck rumbled past, followed by a gap in traffic. He stepped into the crosswalk. He made it halfway before the sedan came around the corner. The driver, texting at a red light 3 blocks back, looked up just as Tyler stepped into view. Brakes screamed against asphalt. The car skidded sideways, clipping the boy with its front bumper and sending his small body tumbling across the intersection. Tyler hit the pavement hard, his backpack splitting open and scattering crayons and homework across the road. His leg twisted at an unnatural angle. Blood pooled beneath his head where it struck the curb. He tried to sit up, confused, calling out for his grandmother in a voice barely above a whisper. The sedan's driver sat frozen behind the wheel, hands shaking, phone still clutched in his palm. Cars behind him honked impatiently, drivers craning their necks to see what was causing the delay. And then came the response that would haunt Springfield for years to come. Nothing. People gathered. Office workers paused their conversations, shoppers slowed their stride, teenagers pulled out their phones. A crowd formed around the scene like water around a stone, but no one stepped forward. Someone should call 911, a woman in a business suit said, but she didn't reach for her phone. Is he breathing? Asked a man in a delivery uniform, but he didn't bend down to check. Phones appeared everywhere, not to dial for help, but to record. The accident, the injured child, the growing crowd, all of it captured in shaky vertical videos that would later flood social media with captions like "crazy accident downtown" and "kid got hit hard." Tyler tried again to sit up, his voice stronger now, tinged with fear. "Help me," he said, looking at the faces surrounding him. "Please, I want my grandma." A woman stepped closer, then stopped. "I don't want to move him," she said. "What if we make it worse?" "Where are the paramedics?" someone called out. "Did anyone actually call them?" another voice asked. Minutes passed. The crowd grew larger, the circle around Tyler wider. People discussed what should be done, who should do it, what the liability might be for getting involved. But no one acted. No one knelt beside the frightened child. No one even offered a kind word. A teenager with a skateboard filmed Tyler struggling to move, narrating for his followers, "Dude got totally wrecked at Maple and 3rd. This is wild." A businessman checked his watch and muttered to his colleague, "We're going to be late for the Morrison meeting." An elderly woman clutched her purse tighter and whispered to her friend, These days, you never know who might sue you for trying to help. Tyler's leg throbbed with each heartbeat. His head felt heavy and strange. The faces above him blurred together, a sea of eyes that watched but didn't see, phones that recorded but didn't care. Blood from his forehead dripped onto his superhero backpack, staining Captain America's shield crimson. "Mama," he whispered, though his mother was miles away at work. "Grandma Rose." That's when the crowd parted, reluctantly, for a man they barely noticed at first. Harold Chen moved slowly through the gathering, his prosthetic leg creating an uneven rhythm against the pavement. He was 72 years old, thin and weathered, wearing a faded veteran's cap and a jacket that had seen better years. His left leg had been gone for 15 years, lost in a moment of heroism that no one in this crowd knew about. Harold had been walking to the hardware store, same as he did every Tuesday, when he heard the commotion. Not the crash. He'd missed that, but the voices. The sound of a crowd that was watching something terrible without doing anything about it. He pushed through the circle of onlookers, ignoring the annoyed looks and muttered complaints about his slow pace. And then he saw Tyler. Without hesitation, without checking with anyone, without worrying about lawsuits or liability or what people might think, Harold dropped to his knees beside the boy. His prosthetic leg made the movement awkward, but he managed it with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been caring for others his entire life. "Hey there, son," he said softly, his voice calm despite the chaos around them. "My name's Harold. You're gonna be okay." Tyler's eyes focused on the old man's face, finding something there that had been missing from all the others. Genuine concern. "It hurts," Tyler whispered. "I know it does," Harold said, gently placing his hand on the boy's shoulder. "But help is coming. I'm going to stay right here with you until it does." Harold looked up at the crowd, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd commanded respect in darker places. "Has anyone called an ambulance?" Silence. Shuffling feet. Averted eyes. Harold pulled out an old flip phone and dialed 911. "This is Harold Chen at Maple and 3rd. A child has been struck by a vehicle and needs immediate medical attention. He's conscious, but appears to have head trauma and a possible broken leg." While he spoke to the dispatcher, Harold used his free hand to carefully check Tyler's pulse, examine his pupils, and assess his injuries with the practiced knowledge of someone who'd seen trauma before. He took off his jacket and placed it over Tyler to prevent shock, never once moving the boy's head or neck. "The ambulance will be here in 4 minutes," Harold told Tyler. "What's your name, son?" "Tyler Mitchell," the boy said, his voice getting weaker. "Tyler's a strong name," Harold said. "You know what, Tyler? You're being very brave right now. Braver than a lot of grown-ups would be." Around them, the crowd began to shift uncomfortably. Some people started to leave, perhaps realizing how their inaction would look once the authorities arrived. Others stayed, but stepped back, creating distance between themselves and their collective shame. The businessman who'd worried about his meeting knelt down on Tyler's other side. "Is there anything I can do?" He asked Harold. "Yes," Harold said firmly. "Call the school. His name is Tyler Mitchell. Tell them he's been in an accident and ask them to contact his family." A woman in scrubs, a nurse who'd been frozen by the bystander effect just like everyone else, finally stepped forward. "I can help monitor his vitals until the paramedics arrive," she offered. As the ambulance sirens grew louder in the distance, Tyler looked up at Harold with eyes that were clearer now, more focused. "Are you a doctor?" he asked. Harold smiled gently. "No, son. Just someone who believes we should take care of each other." The paramedics arrived and took over with professional efficiency, but Harold stayed close, providing them with his observations about Tyler's condition and the timeline of events. As they loaded Tyler onto a stretcher, the boy reached out his hand. "Harold," he said, "thank you for stopping." The old man squeezed his small hand carefully. "Anyone would have done the same, Tyler." But as Harold looked around at the dispersing crowd, at the faces that couldn't meet his eyes, he knew that wasn't true. And deep down, so did they. News of the incident spread quickly through Springfield, but not in the way anyone expected. The teenager's video had indeed gone viral, but not for the reason he'd hoped. Social media erupted with outrage at the crowd's inaction, at the people who filmed instead of helping, at a society that had apparently forgotten how to care for its most vulnerable members. Local news picked up the story. Child struck by car, ignored by dozens until elderly veteran steps in. The headline made people uncomfortable, which was exactly the point. But the real story, the one that would change everything, didn't emerge until 3 days later, when Tyler Mitchell was recovering in Springfield General Hospital. That's when investigative reporter Sarah Martinez discovered who Harold Chen really was. 15 years earlier, Harold had been driving home from his job at the post office when he came upon a house fire in the Riverside neighborhood. 3 children were trapped on the second floor while firefighters were still en route. Without hesitation, Harold had entered the burning building. He'd saved 2 children on his first trip inside. On his second trip, saving 8-year-old Maria Santos, a burning beam had collapsed across his left leg, crushing it beyond repair. He'd managed to get Maria to safety before losing consciousness from blood loss and smoke inhalation. Harold had spent months in the hospital and rehabilitation, ultimately losing his leg. The city had honored him as a hero, giving him a medal and a commendation that he kept in a drawer at home. But the medical bills had drained his savings, and he'd lived quietly on disability ever since, never speaking about his heroism, never seeking attention or acclaim. The 3 children he'd saved were now adults: Maria Santos, a teacher, David Kim, a paramedic, and Jennifer Walsh, a social worker. They'd kept in touch with Harold over the years, visiting him on holidays and making sure he wasn't forgotten. When they learned about the Tyler incident from the news, they were shocked but not surprised. "That's exactly who Harold is," Maria told reporter Martinez. "He doesn't see a choice between helping and not helping. He just sees someone who needs help." The story exploded across national media. The contrast was too stark to ignore. A man who'd already sacrificed so much for strangers' children, stepping forward once again while dozens of others stood by and watched. Springfield was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth about itself. The city council called an emergency meeting. Mayor Thompson issued a public statement. "The actions of Harold Chen remind us of who we aspire to be as a community, but the inaction of others reminds us of how far we've fallen short." The real reckoning came when Tyler's family arranged to meet Harold at the hospital. Tyler's parents, David and Lisa Mitchell, arrived with flowers and tears. "How do you thank someone for something like this?" Lisa asked Harold as they stood beside Tyler's bed. "You didn't just help our son. You showed him that good people still exist in the world." Tyler, his leg in a cast but his spirits high, had drawn a picture for Harold, a stick-figure man with a cane helping a smaller stick-figure boy, with the words, "My hero Harold," written in crayon above it. But Harold deflected the praise, as he always did. "Tyler's the brave one," he insisted. "I just did what needed doing." The transformation of Springfield began slowly, then picked up momentum. The incident had held up a mirror to the community, and people didn't like what they saw. But instead of turning away, they decided to change. The businessman who'd worried about his meeting started volunteering with the Red Cross, taking first aid classes and disaster response training. "I never want to feel that helpless again," he explained to his wife. The woman, who'd been afraid of lawsuits, helped organize neighborhood emergency response teams. "We can't let fear keep us from being human," she told her neighbors. Even the teenager who'd filmed Tyler's suffering donated his viral video earnings to children's charities and started a social media campaign called "Don't Just Watch," encouraging people to act when they witness someone in need. The nurse who'd initially frozen began teaching CPR classes at community centers throughout the city. Knowing what to do isn't enough, she realized. You have to be ready to act. 6 months later, Springfield had the highest per capita rate of CPR-certified residents in the state. Neighborhood watch groups had evolved into neighborhood care groups. The city's Good Samaritan laws were strengthened to protect those who stopped to help in emergencies. Tyler made a full recovery, but the experience had changed him too. Now 9 years old, he spoke at schools about kindness and courage, often with Harold by his side. They'd formed an unlikely friendship, the elderly veteran and the young boy, bonded by a moment that revealed the best and worst of human nature. During one school presentation, a fourth grader asked Tyler if he was angry at the people who didn't help him. Tyler looked over at Harold, who nodded encouragingly. I was sad, Tyler said, but Harold taught me that one person doing the right thing can change everything. So instead of being mad, I try to be like Harold. The question everyone asked Harold was why he'd stopped when no one else would. His answer was always the same. When you've lost a part of yourself saving children, you don't think twice about doing it again. That's not heroism. That's just being human. But Springfield learned that being human required practice, required courage, required a willingness to step outside the circle of watchers and into the circle of care. A year after the accident, the city installed a memorial bench at the intersection of Maple and 3rd. The plaque read, "In honor of Harold Chen and all those who choose action over inaction, compassion over indifference. May we all find the courage to stop when someone needs help." Tyler attended the dedication ceremony, walking without a limp now, his superhero backpack replaced with a new one featuring real-life heroes, firefighters, paramedics, teachers, and volunteers. Harold sat beside him on the new bench, his prosthetic legs stretched out comfortably, watching children cross the intersection safely under the watch of the new crossing guard. Another change the incident had inspired. "Do you think people learned?" Tyler asked Harold as they watched the afternoon crowd navigate the crosswalk with more care and awareness than before. Harold squeezed Tyler's shoulder gently. "Some people learn from their mistakes, son. Others learn from watching other people's mistakes. Either way, learning happened." A mother hurried past with her young daughter, then stopped and came back to the bench. "Excuse me," she said to Harold. "Aren't you the man who helped the little boy? I just wanted to thank you. You showed my daughter what real courage looks like." Harold tipped his veteran's cap. "Your daughter just needs to remember that courage isn't the absence of fear, ma'am. It's doing what's right despite the fear." As the sun set over Springfield, casting long shadows across the memorial bench, Harold and Tyler sat in comfortable silence, watching their city move with a little more kindness, a little more awareness, a little more humanity. The accident at Maple and 3rd had lasted only seconds, but the lesson it taught would last generations. That in our darkest moments, when crowds gather to watch rather than help, it takes only one person willing to step forward to remind us all of who we're supposed to be. Tyler kept Harold's lesson close to his heart as he grew up in a Springfield that had learned to see beyond the circle of spectators. And Harold continued his quiet walks through the city, knowing that he'd helped save more than one child that day. He'd helped save a community's soul. In a world where it's easier to record than to rescue, to post rather than participate, Harold Chen's story asks us a fundamental question. When someone needs help, will you be in the crowd that watches, or will you be the one who stops? Sometimes heroism doesn't announce itself with sirens and spotlights. Sometimes it limps forward on an old prosthetic leg, kneels down on hard pavement, and simply says, "I'm going to stay right here with you." The real test of our character isn't how we act when everyone is watching and cheering. It's how we act when everyone is watching and doing nothing. Harold Chen passed that test without thinking about it. The question is, will we?